So I started collecting. I got lucky, because people thought, Two Gray Hills, and nobody really, they were always finer, always nicer, but they weren't necessarily more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got lucky, I got some pretty nice ones. And so in 1990, I decided I just didn't want to be another white guy that did a book on Navajo stuff. So I was going to do a book on the masterpieces of Two Gray Hills and collect as many as I could. And so, I'd kind of tore out the chapters or photocopied the chapters on Two Gray Hills. And so I started a little file, I had a little bit of information. But I decided I didn't want to be just a white guy that did that. And I should really, and when I sell a 150-year-old Chief's blanket, it's anonymous. We know culturally what part of the world it came from. We know nothing about the weaver, nothing about the wearer, nothing, And so it was the same way with the 30, 40, 50-year-old Two Gray. And I'm going, well, this is stupid,
Somebody should know.
Somebody should know. And so in 1990, Bob Layton, who owned Toadlena Trading companies, older brother Willard Layton had been the trader. I discovered this in my sort of preliminary research, had been the trader at Two Gray Hills from 46 to 59, and he got killed in 59. And Bob was still a trader, and he lived and he had worked with his brother at Two Gray Hills. So he knew the weavers, and so I talked to him about it, seeing what he may know, and he goes, oh, shit, I know all those weavers. Mm-hmm. I'll take you down and introduce you. So in 1990, I took my first trip to the res, with Bob towing me around and introduced me to weavers. So here's Julia Jumbo. I don't even know what questions to ask her. I'm sitting.
Did you even know who she was at that point?
Well, yeah, because I had at least done enough. I read Arizona Highways. I knew a few of the top names. Well, I'd figured out that Daisy Toggleshe was the best Navajo weaver, and she was a Two Gray Hills weaver. And we see Bessie Minicoats from the Maxwell book and from the Shared Horizons thing I'd done in 1980. We borrowed a Bessie. So I was familiar with these names. I didn't realize the rug I bought was a Bessie till later, though. Mm-hmm. I didn't put that together. I just knew it was a fabulous Two Gray. So I went in there, I started interviews. I didn't even know what to ask them. I mean, I figured that genealogy would be a maybe interesting thing to find out how they're related. Right. But I found that it was really kind of odd with the weavers because they didn't really know what they'd done. Mm-hmm. You show a weaver a rug, they're far more familiar with the process than the product because they never see the product completed. The minute it's completed, it's sold. So they see one design or one part of it. So when you show a weaver a rug, I found out because I took a trunk full of rugs out there and I started showing them around, and they went, I don't know. Did you make this? I don't know. You think they'd sit in front of a rug for 6 or 8 months, they would remember it? No, it didn't work that way. They would be like a scanner, like you put it on a scanner. And so they would go up and down the rug with their eyes, and they'd see a part, and they'd laugh and go, oh, I remember when I did that design, and my sister laughed at me for that. Yeah. So they saw the components.
They saw it in periods of time.
Yeah. And, and like all parents do, my daughter was born when I was working on this, my daughter's first birthday. So, but they didn't, there wasn't like, here's the rug, you recognize the design. No, it didn't happen that way.
It makes sense, though, when you think about it.
Yeah.
You're looking at a piece for a long period of time in little sections.
Yeah. So
then it gets moved, you move, and that's all you ever see of the little sections.
Yeah.
Then you finish it, and it's gone.
It's gone. It's history.
I can see that.
Yeah. And so it surprised me, but it forced me to have to look at them the way they looked at them. I couldn't look at them the way I looked at them only. I had to understand how they looked at them. And so I did it for a couple of years. We went out there probably 3 or 4 times a year. Bob would go with me, take me around, talk to weavers.
And would you bring new groups of rugs?
Yeah, I'd bring different rugs and new ones that I got, and I'd find. So I finally found a rug that said, I can't remember who the weaver was supposed to be, but it had a weaver's name, had an old tag with a weaver's name. So I thought, oh, cool. So we go over and show this weaver, and she goes, no, it's not my rug. And I said, well, maybe you just don't remember. I'd learned that they didn't remember. And she said, no, that's not my design. That's not how I do it. And I'm going, well, do you have a design? Oh, yeah. Well, that's not it. So I'm like so disappointed. I mean, this is like the crushing blow that the name on the tag isn't the weaver.
Right.
And I didn't believe her.
Yeah.
I thought she just wanted to mess with me. I did learn about the sense of humor of weavers. And they would mess with you if they get a chance. So I was really disappointed. Well, later that day, we went to see Rachel Curley. And Rachel Curley had made the biggest 2 gray that's up in Toadlena. It was 12 by 18 feet.
Yeah.
So we went to see her. And in the meantime, Bob and I had bought that rug out of California. I found it in California. We bought it, and he built this museum, and he had it downstairs on display and stuff. And he wanted to find out a little more about it, so he wanted to do a video of her, and he wanted to talk to her about doing that. And
Rachel Curley?
Rachel Curley. And so I'm just taking a few notes and, doing whatever I can. I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I'm trying to figure out how to get at this. And Rachel Curley had a book that had some old pictures. And there was the rug that was in my car that wasn't whoever it said it was on it. So I was all excited. I go, that rug looks a lot like the rug I have in my car that other weaver said she didn't do. And so Bob said, well, bring it in. So I brought it in, and she looked at it. She said, yeah, that's my rug. So my disappointment and my excitement happened on the same day, so I did find it.
Did you ask her how the name tag got on, the old name?
They made stuff up. They didn't pay that much attention. They wouldn't have put the weaver name unless somebody would have asked for it and insisted on it. So the traders did. And this is all firsthand information. I'm not making this up.
Yes.
They made it up.
Yeah.
It didn't matter to them. If they put a Navajo signing name on it, that was it.
And this would have been the trading post guys that would do this?
Well, not as much the Toadlena posts, but more so the 2 gray posts after Willard Layton. And then when Willard died, that he was kind of the great trader out there. And so a lot of the traders had to leave the reservation.
And he brought the blue in?
He brought the blue in,
to the 2 Gray Hills?
Yeah, he brought the turquoise in.
Yeah, and what was the time frame that started?
Late
40s?
46, when he took over, he soon started. He had turquoise mines up in Nevada. And so he would take local people, some of them are still alive, so again, firsthand information. He would take them up and have them dig in his turquoise mines in the summer. And he always thought he'd make his fortune in these great turquoise mines. And so he decides in 46, 47, the first documented one I found was in 47 that was purchased from Willard. He had to put little turquoise accents in because he thought turquoise was cool.
We're talking about wool for people who don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Blue wool that would go in the 2 grays, because we usually think of these Toadlena 2 grays as being all natural, but he was actually saying,
he put a little, and turquoise could be any color blue. It could be violet, it could be purple, it could be sky blue. So it wasn't one color, but it was a range. Sometimes they had 2 or 3 shades of it in, but he encouraged it. It was a huge scandal. At Gallup ceremonials, because 2 Gray Hills were all natural wool, and this was natural wool with a dye. And so the Gallup ceremonials said, we won't include these. They're not traditional 2 Gray Hills. We can't have them in there. Well, Willard argued that they were 2 Gray Hills. They just had a little turquoise dye in them. And so it was kind of a...
Did they let him in that year?
They finally did let him in, and they called them 2 Gray Hills with aniline dyes, is what they did.
And probably didn't vote them as best pieces.
Couldn't be best of show, no, because they were sort of looked down upon. Catherine Nathaniel won that first year with the rug that we now have for that. And in 1963, Gil Maxwell says in his fine little book that not a weaver within a 10 or 12 mile radius of 2 Gray Hills will touch that color. Well, and he said instead they are from Tosato. Not from, and that's what everybody says now. Unfortunately, Tosato is less than 12 miles from 2 Gray Hills, so he was wrong about that to begin with. And Barbara Jean Ornalis's grandmother was living at the 2 Gray Hills store, and her husband was working there, and she was weaving ones with turquoise.
Yeah.
In the 40s and through the early 50s. Well, Willard dies in 59, so that's sort of the cutoff day. Darrell Stock, who was managing the store for Willard, stopped encouraging it, and it trickled out within a year or so. He wasn't encouraging it, so the ladies just stopped doing it.
And even when they were making those from 47 to 59, they weren't making that many with blue in there.
Not that
because I don't see them that often.
Yeah, you don't see them that often. I see quite a few more because I'm known for liking them. But there must be 10 of them in my book.
Yeah,
and I tell the whole story in the book too. So anyway, I decided at first in the early 90s when I was out there, I wasn't really getting anywhere, so I had to do something. And I did something I kind of look back at now, think it was pretty smart. I got me a 3x5 card file box right, with all the alphabet things in it. And so any known weaver that I could find in any magazine ever mentioned, I made a catalog card for.
Regardless if there were two gray weavers?
No, it had to be two grays.
Yeah, okay.
Or something that was called a two gray
Yeah.
or similar to a two gray. And so that was sometimes pretty speculative, but I had a catalog card. So I had this whole catalog file of all these names. Then I got one of those big 100 sets of colored pencils. So whenever I talked to somebody about a particular, so I would go through when I talked to weavers. Now I'd say, what about this person? What about this person? And I had colored pencils. And so I coded it. So whoever told me something, I wrote it in color code so I knew who the source was. So I started filling out these catalog cards with all these multicolors of things of who gave me this information. So that was my first organizational efforts. And it worked out pretty good.
Versus a computer where you could do it?
Yeah, well, I didn't know how to use the computer, so I couldn't do that. So it worked out pretty good because I started gathering information, and I knew who told me that.
And this is 1990?
Well, this is starting in about 92.
92.
So in the middle of this, probably 93 or so, somebody said, you should go talk to Claire Sherman. She's an elder. She knows all these people around here. She's worked helping elders. In a lot of cases, people a lot younger than her. She would be, an elder mentor, although she was older than who she was mentoring and stuff. So I went to see her. And by that time, I sort of learned a lot about the Navajo sense of humor. And so I pulled this rug out. And by that time, I figured I had two rugs by the same maker. Just they were very different, but to me,
you could just tell.
To me, I could just thought they were. So I pulled this rug out and showed her, and she said, the first person that ever did it, she said, "Oh, I made that." And I went, "No, you didn't. I made that one." And so she giggled, and she thought that was very cute. So she calls me over to one side of her hogan, and she's got these stacked steamer trunks, and she has me take. She's 80-some years old at this point. She has me take the first couple steamer trunks down. She opens up the third steamer trunk. She pulls out this wooden box, and she opens it up, and she pulls out a picture of her with the rug I had. And I went, oh, my God. So this actually happened before, the Rachel Curley rug. So that was the first time I realized that these ladies had old pictures, because I always knew Navajos didn't like to have their pictures taken, so they didn't have any old pictures. Yeah. I didn't even think to ask. And I went, oh, my God. And I was like amazed. And it had the date on it.
Yeah.
Like those old photos had dates on them. So I went, oh, my God, this is amazing. And I said, wait a second. I ran up to the car and got the other rug that I thought was made by the same person with this rug she just identified. And I brought it and laid it out. And she started crying. Her sister had helped her with it. And her sister was dead now. And there was this whole story to this rug. And I went, wow, this is kind of amazing. And so then I started learning to know to ask for pictures. Because sometimes they tell me they didn't make the rug and they'd have a picture of them with it.
Yeah, and you wanted that for not only to know if it was theirs, but also for dating purposes.
Dating purposes it helped. And also, if a weaver would show me 2 or 3 pictures of rugs she made, I would get a fingerprint of her work.
Yeah.
And I could tell another rug. I could see the similarities of what her pattern was. Yeah. Although weavers tended to work in series. They would do 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10 rugs kind of similar, and then they'd shift their style around. But there'd always be things they would carry from one series to another series.
And why did they shift it? Do you know?
Tired of doing that design?
Yeah, I wonder.
Could have been an outside influence. They could have seen a design from another weaver they liked, or, you never know. They didn't see each other's rugs that much. The traders kept the weavers separated. So nobody knew what anybody got, and nobody really knew anybody's work. Like Bessie Minigoats was a total phenomenon. She was crippled. She spent her life in a wheelchair and a walker. Nobody out there really knew she wove other than her very immediate family. And she was literally the best weaver. She'd finish her rug. She kept to herself. She was very private. She'd take her rugs into the trading post and sell them. Nobody ever saw them. So when I asked about Bessie Minigoats, people would say, did she weave? Well, yeah, she wove. Did she weave?
Interesting that they could keep it that quiet in such a small community.
Amazing. I'd go.
How many people are in that Toadlena Basin?
Well, I think our chapter has, about 900 voters. And not everybody votes. And our weaving area covers 4 chapters. So when you go out there, you don't really realize how many people really do live there, because they our culture, we build on top of a hill for the view. They build down so they're more surrounded by Earth Mother. So when you're driving out there, just right over a hill could be a whole set of houses you'd never really see unless you just know to kind of go over that little hill. So they build down. That's kind of one of their tendencies. Seldom do you see them build in a high spot.
So when did you go, oh, I think I should own a trading post or run a trading post?
Well, I started interviewing the grandmothers. They were very helpful, especially as I started to know things. I went from those catalog cards to sheets, so I started to rough draw genealogy charts. So I had, every interview I had a rough genealogy chart of what I could get somebody to tell me about. A lot of times they'd stop. They'd tell me their sisters, unless one was dead, and then they're like gone. So they don't tell you about a sister that could have been a good weaver.
Yeah, they won't mention their name.
So it took me a long time to break through that and to figure it out. And then a lot of times if their mother was still living, or they would tell me something about their mother, but generally not about their grandmother, because that was kind of going into Navajo taboos. But I kept asking, and I knew I was breaking taboos, but I kept asking. And they started seeing I was interested, and they started seeing I had information, and I was gathering information. That interested them. And several times I'd be interviewing a grandmother, and the grandkids were sitting there, and they go, wow, you know more about my family than I do. And I'd go, well, whose fault is that?
Yeah.
So the genealogy became a fairly important part, but I had fragmented genealogies from a lot of different people.
And how many weavers are out in that basin?
Well, we've bought from over 300. We regularly buy from about 150 to 175 is what we consider we support still today.
And out of that group, how many of those are hand spun?
Less and less, but a large percentage. This is what they did there, so it was pretty good. And commercial yarns creeped in the 70s and 80s, and they would mix hand spuns and store wools and everything too. And the trader at Two Gray Hills, promoted roving, which he claimed was from local sheep, but it was sent off the reservation, mostly to Mora, to the mills, and be commercially carded and spun. J.B. Moore was the first one to do that.
Yeah, he had that beautiful wool.
That beautiful wool. That's what's called roving.
Yeah.
We didn't participate in that. But slowly, I just started falling in love with these grandmothers, And then I was mostly around Two Gray, and I kind of approached Toadlena, but I'd never been to Toadlena. And one day, Bob Layton tells me, well, I know the trader of a Toadlena, R.B. Fouts, and he doesn't really work with weavers much anymore, but there were a lot of good weavers up there. We should go up and see. And I drove up the front of Toadlena, and I went, oh, my God, this is mine.
Yeah, your 1909 rock wall.
I'm just sitting out in front of this place going, because it's such a beautiful setting, against the mountains. I said, oh, this is mine. I'm going to have this place. And so I started kind of thinking about this lease, thinking, well, I was successful in my business. I could afford it.
Your business was in Santa Fe at this point?
By that time, I'm in Santa Fe by this time. And I thought I could afford it. It cost me a couple $1,000s a month to run this little trading post. I could afford it. There'd be some aspects.
And that's what you have to do. You have to get the lease.
You have to get the lease. And R.B. Fouts held the lease. And so I mentioned to Bob that it would be really cool to build a little museum to honor these ladies. And the Hubbell Revival was based on E.A. Burbank paintings. The Chinley Revival was based on the use of vegetal dyes they never used. So there's our revivals. And now I thought, well, I could maybe do a Two Gray Hills revival, but it would be based on them seeing things that they actually did.
Yeah,
so it could be the first revival based on something that was actually done.
Yeah.
Well, that idea went out the window because they had their own design, so they didn't care.
Right.
They admired what I put in the museum, but it didn't affect their weaving any. And so this was just one of the many ideas I had. And so I asked Bob, since he knew RB, if he would just sort of mention this to RB. And when Bob was doing, RB kind of figured that if Bob was taking me around showing me stuff, I must have money. There must be more to this than just meets the eye. So one time when Bob wasn't near us, RB tells me, Bob's a really nice guy, good friend of mine, known him for years, 50 years and stuff, but I know who the real weavers are around here. I've been here 40 years. I know the real weavers. Come out sometimes without Layton, and I'll show you some things Layton can't show you. So we left. We were driving back up to Cortez that night, and I told Bob what RB had told me. And he goes, well, really, that's a good idea. You know, you should go do it. And I'm going, well, you've been my guy. He goes, oh, yeah, we've had a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed this. It's like flash in the past, but he may be right. Go see him. So I did. And I asked Bob, I said, well, why don't you just mention this crazy idea about this museum and taking over the Post? He obviously didn't have his heart in it. He probably had $200 worth of shelves on it. His dad had bought him the Post in 1958. He had bought the Newcomb Post, and at one time he had about 6 or 8 trading posts up on the north side of the res. And he's a Fouts, so he was tied in with all the other Foutses and business partners and all this stuff. He didn't seem to care about Toadlena. He'd go up there because he had friends, and the Mormon church was there, which he attended. But he had Navajos running it, and he obviously didn't care, was doing nothing. So I said, mention him about this museum idea and stuff. And so I went to see him, and he showed me to some weavers, and it was really good. He did show me some cool spots where people lived and all this stuff. I never said a word about the museum or the Post. Mm-hmm. So then I went a second time. And so RB says to me, you know, somebody should just buy this old Post from me and start a museum. I went, oh, that's an interesting idea. I had to make it his idea. Yeah. I knew if I started chasing him, it would get really expensive. Yeah. But if I just let it be his idea. Yeah. So I said, well, you know, I kind of thought about that idea before and stuff. And so we started negotiating. And he told me, well, you know, I haven't made any money here in 10 years. I lose money here. Yeah. He goes, really, if you want to take this Post over and pay me money, I'm happy to do it. And I just thought, bingo, dream come true. Yeah. He was married to a Navajo. He hadn't had a lease for several years. He didn't care about it. But I cared about having a lease. I thought I wanted a legitimate relationship with the Navajo tribe. So he went and got a lease. He went and renewed a lease, and he got written into the lease the right to sell it to somebody and sell his lease. He got that included in his lease. Didn't mean because kind of the Navajo sort of overlooked the concept, really. He sort of snuck it in. But so we did a deal. I paid him what I thought was a fair price, but it was plenty of money for RB. He was more than happy. And then I was going to pay him a monthly stipend, which he says I haven't made any money here for years. He was happy to have money coming in. Right. Well, so we did it, and so I had a Santa Fe attorney write a letter that said what I intended to do there, that I had intended to remodel the Post and to reopen it with more groceries for sale and service the community better, and meantime do this museum here and everything. Mm-hmm. And I asked for permission kind of in the same sentence as saying I was doing it. So I sort of confused the language. And the attorney didn't understand at first, but then he really did understand. And he had worked on the reservation before she was real. So I sort of announced that I was doing it at the same time asking for permission. Mm-hmm. I didn't wait for permission because I thought it could take years, which it did. Yeah. So I just opened the Post. We remodeled. I spent about $100,000 fixing the Post all up on somebody else's building. You know, my people around me thought I was nuts to do it, but it was my dream.
And you wanted to be out there too.
And I didn't know how much I wanted to be out there at the time. Yeah. I wanted more the idea of owning this great Post. Yeah. And so
a historic Post, 1909.
A great historic Post, and a beautiful building and a beautiful setting.
Even though you don't own the building, Navajos own the building.
Own the building.
You do all the construction on it as to just help
the building. Fix it all up. Yeah. Well, it was about 2 years before the HPD, which is Historic Preservation Department, Navajos came to look at the building to decide whether they were going to let me fix it up. And it was totally fixed up. And they walked around. And so one of my Navajo employees came back and said, there's, 2 Navajos with suits and ties from the Historic Preservation Department, and they want to talk to you. And I said, are they mad? He goes, oh, no, they think it's amazing what you've done here. So I went out and I introduced myself and I started chatting with them, and they kept asking me all of these things I did and everything. They were responsible for me doing this, and I had just done it. So I was like, well, I'm not sure how this is going to go. And they said, well, we think this is really cool. Would you come down and give a talk in Window Rock about the work you did here and what your kind of goal is? Right. And so rather than, it's now 21 years later. Yes. My 21st year. I'm still waiting for my lease.
Yeah.
To still have no lease
Yeah.
with the Navajo Nation. I probably shouldn't be saying that, but
Yeah, probably not.
but you can cut it out if you think it's terrible.
No, I mean, it's what it is.
But it is what it is. And so they've attempted several times. I've brought attorneys out from Santa Fe to work out negotiatings for a lease. And it's sort of like that means they have to do something. And it's sort of status quo. They're all related.
Yeah.
Navajos are all related by the complex clan system. And they know. I had no interest in being involved in contemporary rug business. Jackson was in the business early in my career, and I saw weavers come in and selling rugs. That wasn't me. I was interested in old. My museum showed old. That's what we did.
Now, how many new rugs have you bought over
Well,
time?
that's it.
21 years?
So there was, Virginia Deal lived right down the road. And she was one of the great master weavers, and she did like these 3x5 tapestries. She got close to $10,000 a piece for, and Bob took me down there and introduced her. He had dealt with her for years. He bought her rugs, and so I went down there a few times. And then this weaving group wanted to come see what we were doing from a Southwestern or a Four Corners weaving guild. It was all Anglo ladies, and so I went down to Virginia and I said, "Can I bring these ladies over to your Hogan and show them your beautiful masterpiece on the loom?" And she said, "Sure." And so I went down there. It was kind of funny because one of the ladies says to me, "Does she ever use the same designs twice?" And I'm going, "No, they never use the same design twice." But she also speaks English.
Right.
I'm totally embarrassed her. I hadn't intended to, but I said, "You can actually ask her."
Right.
And so...
Yeah, her English was fantastic.
Yeah, her English was fantastic. So she goes, "Oh, she's so embarrassed." And I'm going, No, I was just teasing you about that. And so, because here's this little traditional grandmother sitting at the loom, so it wasn't such an odd question, but unfortunately. So she says, "Well, Grandma, do you ever use the same designs twice?" And so here was just a great Navajo answer, a lot of insight to me. "Oh, I always use the same designs, just in different places." Very cute answer. Yeah. And you met Virginia plenty of times. Yeah. She was a delight, and she was really smart and very talkative and everything.
And
so
beautiful textiles.
Yeah, and beautiful textiles. She's my cover girl, so that meant a lot. And so...
And let's talk about that when we say cover girl, because you ended up with all this information doing a book, right?
Yeah. And then I slowly started taking fragmented genealogy charts and finding and realizing that this name on this chart was a main name here, it was an obscure name there, and kind of started plugging things together. And I knew the clan system was there and was very alive, but it was very complex. I didn't understand it. So I'd always say when I interviewed, and I started learning that the Navajos use the same terms we do, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, and everything, like we don't use it. It's a much broader term to them. It can be, a brother can be a clan brother. So I realized that really early on in my interviewing, because they would totally confuse me with all these relationships. And so I started saying, no clans. I don't want to know anything about clans. I only want brothers, sisters. I want direct relatives, not clan relatives. I didn't really understand what that meant exactly. But after I started plugging the families in enough, and I'd heard clan mentions enough, I finally said, okay, it's time now. So I tried to study what the clans meant, and I said, okay, now I want to know what the clans mean. And so that helped me broaden my genealogy charts and realize that these people were Tangle people and these people were my Deskisni. There were several families of them, but if there was several families of them, they lived in one other, that meant there was probably a common relative somewhere back there. So that gave me a target to go looking for how to do it. And I learned how Navajo relationships work, so I knew how to use their family relationships, certainly not against them, but how to get more information from them. So because I'd say, well, did your grandmother have any sisters? And they'd say, I don't know that. And I'd say, well, did your mother have any cousin brothers or sisters? And that's first cousins. So the mother couldn't have had cousins unless the mother had a sister or brother that gave her cousins. So I learned how to maneuver around what they knew to inspire them to tell me what I wanted to know.
Yeah, which is to figure out who all these weavers were.
Yeah, who all these weavers were. And so we did so in the middle of all this, the masterpieces of Toadlena Two Gray Hills became the master weavers of Toadlena Two Gray Hills.
And that was the book.
And that's the book. And so it's a 600-page book, and
it's
it's been very successful.
Yeah, super dense.
It has 23 genealogy charts of the master weavers. I thought, and when I was growing up in Southern California, they used to have the Fabulous 52. And on Saturday nights, they played a movie. And they played the movies one night every year, and then they started again. And so they played the best 52 movies. It was called the Fabulous 52, and we all would gather around the TV when I was young and would watch this. So that was going to be one of my themes, the Fabulous 52.
Right.
Because this is just a leftover from my... So I was hoping I could get to 52 weavers. I think I have 84. So I soon surpassed that.
Yeah.
And people ask me all the time, what's a master weaver? What does it mean? I go, it means I like them. It's my book. I can do it anything I want, But they had to have a distinctive style. They had to
Original voice.
They had to have original voice.
Yeah.
They had to be productive enough that they left a legacy. There's pieces of theirs in museums, pieces of theirs in private collections. So it wasn't always the same for each weaver. I really liked it when they continued their tradition. They taught their kids and grandkids, but neither Bessie or Daisy did that. So I couldn't leave them out.
Right.
So there was different criteria for different people. But there was a few ladies that I mentioned in my book should have been master weavers. They're not quite there yet. Now they're there.
Yeah.
So
how was it taken by the weavers of the community? What did they think about that?
Oh, they thought it was unbelievable. I mean, a big customer for my book is Navajos, especially ones that have moved off the reservation and heard these things from their mothers and grandmothers, but never really knew it. And so they buy our book for the genealogy charts. And we have copies of all the genealogy charts. We're happy to give them just copies because it's their information.
Well, and you gave books to all the weavers too, didn't you?
Every weaver featured in the book was given a book.
Yeah.
And if they were deceased, which a lot of the weavers were deceased, we gave it to what we call the heir apparent.
Yes.
So that was the lady. It was always given to ladies. Mm-hmm. It was the lady least likely to pawn it. Because the book was valuable.
Yeah, it's an expensive book.
And so we signed them all to the weaver intended, although I'd present it to a daughter, and I'd say, to Marie Little Joe, to her daughter Victoria Minigoats, in honor of your mother, or honor of your grandmother. And so we signed all the books, and we gave one. We took pictures of me giving all the books to all of them, and so it was a big thrill. And then their relatives would see the book, and they'd want one. And it's like I said, especially if they're off the reservation because they knew this, but they don't know it anymore.
They don't have the history.
And so they come in all the time and they say, how my family's related to that family over there. And I go, well, let's go look it up together. So we look it up and they're really thrilled.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And when the grandmothers saw that I was really getting good at it and getting information, and I'd ask some a really obtuse question about, your grandmother's older sister's mother, something like this, they'd go, I just don't remember that anymore. And there was partially what you talked about of them not mentioning the names of dead people, but they kind of started getting over that with me because they knew I needed a name.
Yeah.
And so there was times when they'd say I couldn't remember. And a week later, the grandson would come in and say, my mom or my grandmother remembered that name and she made me write it down. Here's that name you wanted.
And is that because she felt more comfortable giving it to the grandson to give to you?
No,
or she did remember it.
She finally remembered it.
Okay.
And so a lot of times it was just memory lapses, and so they were perfectly happy to give me the information. So I chased it back as many generations as I could. The oldest generation is Narbona, who was born in 1766, and he was killed by U.S. troops right out there about a mile or two from the trading post on August 31st, 1849. His descendants still weave for me today. So we have that genealogy chart starting in 1766. Many of our families went back to Bosque Redondo because when they were herded up to take it to Bosque Redondo, when they were allowed to come back, they went right back where they were. That was their home.
Yeah.
So those people have been there
since 1868.
At least since long before 1868.
Yeah, but they came back to their home spot.
And so I used some public references for stuff, but I didn't really want to use many. I found out that that they started doing censuses out there in 1922 and 1923, and they basically feel they're completed by 1925.
I wonder if they did that because in 1924 is when they actually finally became citizens of the United States.
Probably, and
Yeah.
so there was a little more responsibility
Yeah.
to our citizens. And so they would bring me in their census sheets that they had gotten for sort of grazing disputes, or for some reason they would have it. It was all kept at St. Michael's Mission. That's who did it, was the Franciscans, friars that were out there. But I found from listening to the stories and looking at the information that they literally would make everybody sitting in the same hogan that day part of the same family. So they would always show me this, but they'd always start telling me what was wrong with it. That person was really from a different clan, different family. He happened to be in the hogan. And so I realized that those weren't real reliable sources because everybody had a variation on it. So I decided purposely to never go to St. Michael's and look those charts up, although I know there's a lot of information there.
Try to get it firsthand.
It probably would have, yeah. So my book, I'm really proud, is firsthand information.
And so let's talk about that. So you've been doing this 21 years. You've written this great book. You're getting older.
Let me just finish one quick story for if I can. Virginia comes in after I bring a couple groups down there.
Yeah.
And she says, well, I had a Belagana come to my house today, wanted to buy my rug. And I said, did you sell it to him? She goes, no. And I said, well, why not? And she says, well, I told him that you bought it and you'd already given me a deposit on it and I couldn't sell it. And I'm going, well, Virginia, I haven't given you a deposit and I never bought a contemporary rug from a weaver. Well, you just liked it so much and you brought all those Belaganas to see it. I'm going, does that mean you want a deposit? She'd say, yeah, that'd be pretty good. So I gave her a deposit. That was my first rug.
That was your first rug?
That was my first rug. Bought in the summer of 1997.
So you started with one of the best.
Started with the best.
That's tough.
So,
but getting to that, what happens next?
So here's what happens next.
I mean,
a week goes by. Lady comes in. They never see the rugs when they come in. They're wrapped in a flour sack, pillowcase, a sheet, depending on how big of the rug. Yeah. She comes in wrapped up. I kind of figured what she had. And she says, and this is another real funny Navajo sort of thing, I want to give you my rug. I'm going, oh, cool, it's my birthday, I'd love a nice present. What do you got, And she goes, no, I mean, sell you my rug. But it's always, I want to give it to you.
Yeah.
That's just their language.
Yeah, that's the culture.
So I said, well, I think it's a beautiful rug. You did really good. I don't buy contemporary rugs, though. She goes, really? You bought one from my cousin? I went, uh-oh, I did buy one from her. Oh, you're Virginia's cousin? Yeah, she's my auntie and blah, blah, blah. I thought that was cool.
So even at that point when you first started, you really weren't thinking about buying any contemporary? It was just for the old things?
Just for the old things.
Oh, isn't that
I wanted to start this revival. I thought it'd start a revival. I didn't want to buy the rugs out of a revival. I just thought it would be the first revival that was actually a revival.
Oh, yeah. You opened Pandora's box.
Opened Pandora's box. Yeah. And so soon the word got out. Because I didn't know how much to pay. I paid them what they wanted, which was more than they'd ever gotten. I was this rich guy the way they looked at it. Yeah. And so ask him a little more. Yeah, in their world, yes. And RB was sort of hard on him buying rugs. And I don't want to speak ill of RB because he set me up in the post, but he didn't sell rugs. And so he didn't pay very good prices for them. They were used to that. And so when I first this is in hindsight going back to this day, what I was dealing with, which I hadn't realized, is when there was no good traders out there anymore, but there was great weavers. And so they didn't have a local market for the rugs. So they had to go to Farmington. They had to go to Gallup. They had to go to Flagstaff. They had to go down to Sedona and sell them to Garland's, who was a little more fair with them. And he knew who some of the good Two Gray Hills weavers should be. And were. But let's say they made, which wasn't unusual for a Two Gray Hills weaver to make a $5,000 rug, okay? And they go somewhere they're not known, really, by name or anything. And the trader thinks, well, that's great. It is a beautiful rug. I could probably make a little money, but if I paid $4,000, I could make more money. Or I could sell it a little easier. So he offers her $4,000. Weavers are their own worst enemy when they go to sell their rug because they spend so much time on the loom and so their needs are so great.
Yeah.
So they really kind of go for the first deal. They have to. They feel they have to. So they took the 4,000. So what was the message to the weaver? Don't make a $5,000 rug anymore. You're only going to get
smaller.
4. Make a $4,000 rug. And what did they get? 3. So they made a $3,000 rug and they got 2.
Yeah, they kept making them smaller and
smaller, and they kept, and so it wasn't an intentional thing on the traders, but they never thought about what the message was the weaver was.
Yeah.
So when I first got there, when I went around to these great weavers that I had discovered or seen in books and wanted to interview them and asked about their rugs, they said, nobody cares anymore. And I said, well, I care. Make me a beautiful rug. And so they make me a rug, and they bring it in, and they'd say $1,000 or $2,000. And I go, fine, here's your money. You win. But I want to win next time. I want you to make it twice as big and twice as nice and twice as fine, and I'll give you $1,800 for it. So they bring me in one half the size, really thick, and say, you said $1,800. And I'm going, no, you didn't hear the first part, which is bigger and finer.
Right.
So they all tested me. All totally individually.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when people say, what do the weavers think about this? I'm going, well, they're people. They just think, they all think totally differently. So I reversed the process. I started offering them more. I want to pay you more. I want to pay you more. I want to pay you more.
Pay you more for bigger and finer.
And finer and nicer design.
Take more time to do it.
Make your border all the way around it. That's one of the few things I do. And so we talked them up. We reversed the process. We started talking them up. And it was big. It was really successful. And so after that first rug in 97, which I really wasn't going to buy rugs, 21 years later, this summer we bought our 75th, 100th rug out of that community. They have to be on our genealogy charts, have to be from our community for us to buy the rug. I can't afford to support the whole Navajo Nation.
And that's why you want to support that base.
And I want to keep our community
And that's
supported.
where you provide food and things too through your store and that
yeah,
kind of thing
and we
too.
let them have credits, so they get store, they get money, and so it's all uncollateralized, and it's all no interest.
Right.
And so have we paid for a lot of rugs we've never gotten? Yes, but we have to sort of average that into the whole thing that we're doing. But the grandmothers we never have any trouble with. They're so happy to have a local market. We're nice to them. We don't make buying their rug a battle.
Yeah.
We do exactly the opposite of that. We're nice to them. We compliment them.
And I've seen it firsthand, so I know that's true.
And we tease them. I can't tell you how nice your rug is. You're going to want too much. So we're very open about it.
Yeah, but they know you after 20 years.
Yes, and so we have a very good relationship. And so I tell people, I've been out there 20 years now, 21 years, and I tell people it took me spent the first 10 years trying to get them to weave and to do better. I spent the last 10 years trying to get them to quit.
And so what happens when you're gone? Do we
Well,
know?
that's a big question.
I mean, that's a
Linda
real
had
question.
a friend that worked with, the state of New Mexico, economic development in the state of New Mexico to talk to see if we could get some kind of funding. They obviously can outweave my ability to buy rugs, and they do.
Right.
And so she went and talked, and that was the girl's first question. Well, what if Mark dies? What happens? And Linda goes, it's over.
Yeah.
There's nobody to step in. Nobody wants to lose as much money as Mark's lost, but we've done good. So I first teasingly said in an interview that, they said, well, how long are you going to do this? I said, well, until I buy 10,000 rugs, just as a joke.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd hit it. When I hit 7,500, it was a milestone this summer. So we figured how much money. So well over $5 million we poured into that community.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's been huge. And the tribe knows, they're related. They know what we do in the community. They leave us alone. Yeah. They just don't mess with us. We don't have a lease. We operate totally illegally at that post. They just let us be.
Yeah.
They don't say anything to us. And now their latest Department of Tourism things only mentions 2 trading posts on the reservation, Toadlena and Hubble.
Yeah.
And Tease, Two Gray, all these other trading posts are still leaseholders to the Navajo Nation. They're not even mentioned.
Do you think there'll be trading posts in 50 years?
No. Oh, no. So
25 years?
I consider us the last trading post. Yeah. And although I will give I'll give John at Tease credit. He still runs a little more authentic because he does mutton and he sells hay and he sells things that they can get elsewhere. So I don't concern myself with those.
Though you do wool.
We're
right?
concerned with wool. It's very important to do. And And all weaving, anything weaving oriented is very important to do. But basically, as far as working with the weavers, giving them credits, and really encouraging them, we're the last trading post.
So you think in 25 years there won't be any trading posts? Really?
Depends on how long I live.
Yeah.
Or if somebody wants to step in and do it. You know,
Yeah.
there's people that want to step in and do it, but when I explain the reality of the situation to them,
Right.
you know, this is not a money-making operation. I've lost money here 21 years in a row.
You live out in your trailer.
Yeah, and we live out there.
RV thing.
Yeah, and that's how we choose to live. We love it. We love the people. We love the interchange for the people. They have those fabulous sense of humor.
Yeah, they really do.
and just the interchanges that go on daily.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they all kind of figure their way around me a little bit to get a little more for the rug and to do this. Their needs are so great, we just let them win.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know.
And I think that's what people forget. The needs are so great.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Listen, the people, you know, these
Unbelievable.
doctors without borders fly to all these foreign countries and do all this, and I go, you guys are missing the point. This is the great need in our own
yeah,
country.
no electricity, no running
Huge,
water,
huge need.
no housing.
You know, like with this recent election, that they forced all the Native Americans to have addresses, and so they stopped 8,000 Native Americans
Yeah.
from voting.
Yeah.
And it was
There are no streets.
It's a political situation, you know, and they're sort of subject to all these things that they don't even understand. And we have adopted the Star Trek sort of idea of dealing with them, what in Star Trek they called it the prime directive. You don't mess with the culture. You do as little as you can to actually affect the culture at all. And so we've always taken that. It's impossible out there. We get sucked into being advocates of so many situations that we really wish we weren't in the middle of, but we're the only solution for it a lot of times.
Yes.
You know, they don't understand the way things work. They start involving in mishandling it and get themselves in deeper with all kinds of situations. And Linda spends a lot of time in advocacy with dealing with problems they have, and they'll bring us in all this paperwork or, you know, different issues that they have, and we have to try to kind of sort it out. And we understand the importance of it. It's not our favorite thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Navajos have a very interesting thing, and I learned this very much in doing genealogy. They keep something for themselves. They never expose to you everything. So a lot of times the rest of the story was what we really needed to hear.
Yeah.
and we're in the middle of advocacy, and you
Yeah.
didn't tell me that.
Yeah. Right.
You know? So it's
Again,
like,
a cultural thing.
yeah, it's a cultural. It's very much a cultural thing. And so I learned that with the genealogies that I had to go back several times to every person to find out the whole story, because I'd only find out some of the story. In one case that was really kind of funny, a lady told me a very complex story about how she learned to weave. Very distinctive story. And so I made a point of interviewing all the weavers a few times, and which was easy because they were always bringing me in rugs, borrowing money or bringing me rugs. So as always, and they got to call me the guy that has too many questions, because they'd say, "Can I borrow 200? Sit down for a minute."
Yeah.
What did you say, your grandmother's? You know, and
Right.
and so that got to be my name in Navajo, and I can't say it, but the guy that asked too many questions. So, and so when I interviewed this lady another time, and I remembered her story because it was a really kind of real distinctive, very interesting story. She's sitting there telling me a whole different story. And so I didn't have her original notes. They were in Santa Fe, and I was out at the reservation. I was living in Santa Fe at the time. But I wrote down the new things she told me. But when I went home, I compared them, and they were two completely different stories. So next time she came in, I sat her down, and I said, "You told me this whole story about this, that's how you learned to weave." She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, the second time I talked to you, you told me this whole other story to weave." And she goes, "Yeah." And I'm going, "Well, which is the truth? Which is the real story?" And she thought about it for a while before she said anything, and she said, "They both are." This is about her first rug she made.
Yeah.
So it was two stories.
Yeah.
So, and the idea of first rug is great. We have really, we bugged, when the grandmother came in, they had kids, grandkids, we bugged them. Where's your rug? Where's your rug? Where's your rug?
Yeah.
So we've now bought over 200 first rugs.
Yeah.
So in the book, it shows in every family people that brought their first rugs.
Try to keep the art alive.
To keep the art alive, yeah. And a lot of times the first rug was the last rug. Some of our first rug weavers have won prizes at Gallup ceremonials. So it's kind of both ways. So it's kind of fun. You know, we really feel that we have kept the tradition alive. I'd love to make I'm still young enough that I'm planning on keeping. I'm going to hit 10,000 without a question. So we'll see what happens from there. But
and we have them here at Medicine Man Galley.
that's right. That's right. Mark, you've been a really big supporter of the Post, all of our efforts.
Yeah, well, we think it's super important.
More so than any other art dealer, any other person in the business. You singularly have done more, have been a bigger supporter than anybody.
Well, I get it. I see it. I go out there and I see the needs.
Yeah.
Which are immense.
It's immense.
Yeah, and so it's important. And it's important to not only help the people, it's important for their art form, I think. Because they're interconnected.
Yeah.
You know.
And we've managed to continue it. And by offering to pay them more, we've got nicer rugs.
Yeah.
We get a really good product. I'm not afraid of expensive rugs.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because I sell expensive blankets. And so I don't mind. And so they've got that idea. Although, unfortunately, so many of our great weavers have passed away.
Yeah.
And we're down to slim pickings on tapestry weavers anymore.
Yeah.
But the tapestry hasn't been the long-standing, continuing, desirable thing, you know. And in 74, when the Arizona highways, Tom Buffalo, Jet Age Trader, you know, the latest Daisy that came off the loom, the latest Julia Jumbo that came off the loom, they were just, you know.
Right.
It was people waiting in line to get their hands on them and competing for them.
Yeah.
We haven't really been able to create that. That's probably my lack of promotional skills
No, I don't
or
know
something.
if that's true. It may just be the times, too.
Yeah,
Mark.
it's a different time,
Yeah.
you know, and but we still do just fine. We sell a lot of two grays. We've got a really good reputation. We get visitors from all over the world. We get lots of tour groups.
And is the Post open 7 days a week?
In the summers.
Yeah. And then
So
in the
now
winters?
this Sunday is our last Sunday. We'll close from now to close to Easter on Sundays, and we're just open.
Sundays, though.
Yeah.
And then
for Sundays.
And what are the hours?
Well, we open from 10 to 5 in the winter. Navajos have sort of issues about the dark. The evil things happen at night. You know, so do the ceremonies that combat evil. But so we just like our employees to be able to get home
Yeah, so 10 to
by
5.
dark.
Basically.
So 10 to 5 and 10 to 6 in the summers.
Yeah.
We had 45 people there from the Tucson Museum of Art a couple of weeks ago, you know.
Yeah.
And then the next day, a big group for the Wheelwright Museum in Santa Fe. We've had Stanford alumni groups. I had a Model A club. There was 25 Model A's.
I hope you got some photos.
Oh, it was fabulous. It was just fabulous. So one day we were doing a tour group for a group. We get weaving groups. We had Pendleton brought us 15 people. Their top 15 people at Pendleton came out. They bought a rug from us, and then they've now reproduced it as a Pendleton, part of their Weaver series. Mary Henderson is her name, and it's a beautiful two gray. They did a fabulous job of reproducing it. And so they're now out, and they gave Mary $1,500 to use her design.
Nice. Yeah, good.
And 6 Pendletons.
Yeah.
And so the other day, we get a package from Pendleton. I'm going, what's this? Now we open it up, and they've made like a cardigan, kind of a jacket out of her design, so they had to send her one.
Yeah, good.
So she came in to sell us a rug, and I go, oh, Mary, look, here's this. And she just loved it. She couldn't believe it. So,
well, I think it's important for people to be able to go out and see this Post. It's an amazing place, and it's about an hour north of Gallup. It's very easy to find, and you're very accessible. And if you're not, you've got very accessible employees that are wonderful. You want to give them a shout out?
Yeah, our weavers, our employees.
They're wonderful.
We have Navajo preference laws. So all of our employees have to be Navajo as far as being on the reservation. Yeah. We have great employees. And they're all weavers, except Dolores, of course, never did learn to weave, and she's not really particularly interested. Her sister wove early, and she kind of got away from it. Now she's very much into it. Yeah. And they love it. They know what the good we do with the community. They're very family and community-minded. Most Navajos are. And they know what we do. And they see the money go out there. Sometimes they just shake our heads. That lady cheated you 5 times, and you still give her money? And I'm going, it's my culture she's cheating. It's not me. Yeah. We don't take anything personally. Yeah. And so by cheating us, it means they just don't pay back their bills, but they always want more money. Yeah. Or they don't bring us their rugs, which is what we hope to get. Yeah. But our employees do a fabulous job. They're very informative I'll have to say something about Thelma because
Yeah.
people leave the Post and they call me. They go, "Yeah, just at your Post, and it was beautiful, and the Navajo lady that took care of me was really great, but I've never heard a Navajo that talks so much." I go, "Oh, Thelma was working that day."
Yeah, Thelma does.
And they go, "Oh, that was her name? Yeah, Thelma."
Yeah.
So she's very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And so her and I get into talking competitions with people in
Yeah, I
there
believe it.
sometimes. But they do really a great job. It allows us to get away from the reservation, which is good because we can do shows and we can raise the money necessary to keep the Post going, which is very important. And most of the money that really operates the Post is not made. People think we sell the rugs and we make money. We mark them up a little bit. But that's not how we make our money.
Yeah.
And we do network with several galleries like you.
Yeah.
Generally, you as a gallery owner will make a lot more on one of our rugs than I will.
That's good to know.
And we try to control our prices to keep them selling.
Yes.
And we don't let any of the dealers we work with get full markups. If they want our quote-unquote product line, they have to be willing to work.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we want the weavers to get money.
Yeah, and that we want everybody that we're involved with to have
Super
that idea in
important.
mind,
Yeah.
that the idea is that we're channeling money to this great
Yeah,
tradition.
it's the most important.
And it works really, really well. And so we've got a great kind of team behind us that really support us,
Yep.
fabulously. And we can't, so we don't, they say accept no credit, receive no blame. So that's how we treat it. And so it's been just the most delightful experience to getting to know all these grannies.
Yeah.
We hate it that we lose them, unfortunately. But it's just been an absolutely wonderful thing. And my wife, Linda, first came out there and said, all these weavers and all their families, and I'll never figure this out and anything. She's from New York City and moved out to the Southwest.
She knows them all
Southwest now she knows them all.
Everyone I've
And they
seen.
all know Linda, and if she's not in the Post, they want her to come in so they can hug her and say hi to her and everything. And she's very sociable and,
she is. She's
kind of a thrill with them. So I got to give a good shout out to her because us guys think we're pretty cool, but like on the Navajo reservation, it's the women that rule the roost. In our culture, we get to think we're in charge, but we know who's really in charge.
So everyone go see Mark Winters and Linda Winters' wonderful trading post, Toadlena Trading Post. It's an hour north of Gallup. He's very hospitable. I guarantee you he will talk as long as he did today.
How long did we talk?
A couple hours.
Did we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you did. I just kind of listen. I enjoy.
Yeah.
So, Mark Winter, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for including me. And
Yeah.
you've just, like I said, can't say enough about you. You've always been a good supporter.
Well,
So
I've got a new Charles Bloom book that's coming out.
I didn't even know what a podcast was because
I know you didn't.
I live at the end of a dirt road on the Navajo reservation, so I don't know about all this stuff.
Yeah, and the internet's not that great there either.
Yeah, it's not that great. And I always say that I'm thinking about entering the 20th century. Now it's over.
Yeah. There's always the next one.
There's always the next one.
All right.
So,
Mark
great.
Winter, Toadlena Trading Post. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Is that good?
Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, ebooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.